Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I'm Uday Bhaskar. This week, we review an issue that does not receive adequate attention in the prevailing public discourse, namely the correlation between national security and the business leader in a robust and normative democracy. Some tenets merit recall. First, national security is a comprehensive concept and not confined to the military dimension alone. Yet, the military is a major attribute of state capability, and an apolitical and professional military functioning under an empathetic civilian dispensation provides the core stability to the democratic experience. Second, the efficacy of the military and the ability to sustain it for the long term is derived from the depth of the treasury. In other words, deep, wealth-laden pockets, as it were. And in the modern globalized world, the state can enable and regulate, but the serious business of creating wealth and prosperity falls within the domain of the business community, or what is often referred to as the private sector. And to that extent, the business leader ought to be an active and involved stakeholder in matters of national security. What has been the nature of this linkage in the world's oldest and largest democracies, that is, the United States of America and India, respectively? To discuss this, we have an eminent panel. Allow me to welcome and introduce Mr. Stanley Weiss. He's a World War II veteran and the chairman and founder of what is called as Business Executives for National Security, or BENS, in the United States. Mr. Atul Punj, chairman of Punj Lloyd, and he heads a company that has a fairly large footprint as far as defense and military issues are concerned. Welcome, Mr. Punj. And Mr. Ravi Bhoothalingam. He is currently the chairman of Manas Advisory, and he is again one of those rare businessmen come intellectuals who has an interest in both the domains. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me turn to you first, Mr. Weiss. As I said, you have a long experience having looked at this connection between national security and the business executive. So could you share your experience with us? How did you think of BENS, and how did it sort of grow?
Well, I think we should begin by its name. You've just summed it up. It's called Business Executives for National Security. I was in the mining business, mining a strategic mineral and selling it to a strategic stockpile run by the Pentagon. It turned out that they would buy everything from me at a very high price and sell it to me at a very low price. I began to wonder whether all the agencies were as poorly run.
Or as generous.
Well, as poorly run as this, and came to the conclusion that mostly they were and needed a business connection. Secondly, in the year that I spent at something called the Center for International Affairs at Harvard, I used to listen to what I thought were insane conversations about the nuclear question. I'd hear these nuclear, what I call theologians, saying, we only have 32,000 nukes and the Soviets have 34,000. We're in deep trouble. I always thought, how do you prevent one nuclear weapon coming? So I thought, why don't I start an organization that would bring business executives together in order to bring our successful business practices to help the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies, to be more pragmatic, more businesslike. And in 1982, started this thing. We don't take a penny from the government. These are all successful business executives who care about the countries. Those business people who join in order to help themselves or their company, I've asked to leave. And we have now 700-800 business executives, all of whom we pay our own way in order to help the country. And for the first time, business has a real seat at the table. And
So it would be fair to say that in the last 35 years, from 1982 to now, you have ensured that the American business voice is heard at the national security table. Would that be a fair assessment?
absolutely. There's one of the first things that we did, we had military installations for a 15 million man World War II army when there were 2 million people there. So we worked with Congress to get rid of, they're saving $30–40 billion a year now in having got rid of those.
So that's an achievement. Mr. Punj, if I could bring you in on this, we have heard a little bit about the American experience. Would you like to help our viewers understand what is the play in India? How does the sort of domain work out, the business sector and national security?
Well, I'll spend a minute in just giving the difference as I see it between America and India. In America, the movement between sectors is almost seamless. By that I mean from academia into government, into private business, okay? It's constantly rotating. So the best talent keeps moving from sector to sector. Unlike that, unlike the American way in India, typically you have what we call the cooling off period. So somebody who's had valuable experience is now wanting to move into the private sector or move into academia. Academia may not be so much of a problem, but the private sector is a strict no-no. So I think unless we get out of this suspicious mindset, the ability for us to really communicate freely in the collective national interest, okay, will be limited. So I think the emphasis really should be to try to bring in the private sector as a trusted partner in the entire national security discourse, especially as far as geopolitics is concerned as well. A lot of companies from India, a lot of Indian nationals are working in the Gulf, for example. Okay, there's maybe $70 billion of inward remittance that comes in from the Gulf. If something goes wrong in the Gulf, it impacts our entire foreign exchange balance. So it's very important to have business in sync with the government and the External Affairs Ministry to really keep a watch on what's going on and what is it, if anything, that we can do to influence matters. We do know at different points in time, private sector is involved in back channel diplomacy because some individuals have a relationship, but that is a rarity. It is not really something that's commonplace. We need to find a way to institutionalize that, and I think Benz is a great example of having done it successfully. Mr. Weiss is one of the few people who's a legend in his own lifetime, and it would be great if we could have a few more like him in India.
I'm going to come back to you about India and whether or not we could have something like Benz. But Mr. Bhoothalingam, if I could ask you to step in here. You have been looking at national security. I've seen your writings. I've heard you speak on the subject. But given your experience in business, how would you assess the Indian strategic culture, both in terms of the government, which has the responsibility for national security, and for business leaders like Mr. Punj and his other peers, those who are actually involved or engaged in some parts, for instance, defense manufacturing, which is a very huge area, I think, and a challenge for India. So how would you describe this linkage, national security and the business leader?
Well, increasingly, Uday, there is, especially in recent years, there has been greater interaction between the business world and our defense and security establishment, but nowhere as much as the potential holds. And it's not just a matter of outsourcing manufacture to business and getting them to build all the widgets. That's only one part of it. It will, I think, help to understand what are the strengths that business can bring to the national security sector. There are many of them, but let me just take one or two examples. The key to business today, to success in business, is innovation. And in every field, whether it's services, whether it's production, whether it's innovation to reduce cost, to improve marketing, to provide more features, to provide long-lasting products, and so on. And we have many examples in the United States, as Stanley will know. A huge amount of research has been funded by the security industry, by the defense industry. DARPA has produced many innovations, and not just in the security field, which are of use in medicine, in other fields. So, if you just take the field of innovation and businesses which thrive on innovation, it's their lifeblood. If they fail in it, their business fails.
So you're saying innovation must come into national security.
That's right.
So what's serial 2?
So, if you have a greater combination, businesses can not only do innovation for national security, but they can transfer the knowledge of how to do it to national security. That's my first piece. My second piece is that security, and national security is not, as you said, only military. It's got many dimensions. Business is also about risk management. There are so many types of risk. There are people risks, you might lose good people. There are natural risks, there are market risks in launching a new product and so on. So a good businessman practices what in the jargon we call risk management. And all businessmen do it whether they know it by that term or not. And that is also fundamentally the job of national security.
So you can bring that back. So
Exactly.
I'm going to bring that back to you, Ravi, in a moment and ask you to perhaps think about risk management in relation to the India-China relationship. But I'll come back to you in a moment.
Okay.
Stanley, sir, if I'd ask you, 1982 to 2017 is 35 years of Benz. You've been the founder chairman and others have followed you. What would you highlight as the major achievements or the big ticket successes, if you will, of Benz over the last 3.5 decades?
Well, I think number one is Benz working very closely with Senators Nunn and Lugar, I believe helped prevent having a nuclear war. And people forget there used to be something called a hotline. The hotline, in fact, was a telex that kept breaking down. And we put together something called Nuclear Crisis Control Center, in which we had a real live Russian in Washington and a live American in Moscow. They could actually talk to one another when the birds were flying and they thought there was a missile, but no, they weren't.
So this is the Cold War, during the Cold War.
This was during the Cold War, yes. It's a different world today.
Yes.
That was, you asked me between 82 and when that finished. But you mentioned innovation. I want to tell a little story. Take one moment. I got a call about 10 years ago from one of the top people at CIA suggesting that they'd like to start a venture capital group. Why a venture capital group? Are you mad? No, we'd like to have a venture capital group. I said, why? He said, well, have you ever seen a James Bond film? Sure. Remember Mr. Q?
Yes.
Sure. Well, we want to make toys, just like Mr. Q did. I said, what do you think? So I got the venture capital list in Benz, and they thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a little screwy myself, but in any event, out of this came something which is a great success called InQtel, in which they make the kinds of things I can't talk about, but are just very, very special. But it becomes part of this innovation that you mentioned over there.
So let me get this right. The American Central Intelligence Agency reaches out to Benz, and you in turn are able to put some money together and encourage, some R&D guys, the geeks to do something. And that turns out to be a great, shall we say, bonus, or it gives you greater capacity to the intelligence agencies. I hope our agencies are listening and watching the show. There are some ideas. Atul, maybe you should come in here and tell us, is it possible for us to, and more seriously, to consider the equivalent of an Indian Benz, meaning what Mr. Weiss has said, and I think this is my takeaway, that he's got about 700 or 800 American businessmen who are putting their money down for national security. They expect nothing in return. No favors from the government, no contracts. They are doing it because they are committed to American national security. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they're expecting everything in return, helping our nation.
Yeah, in helping the nation and national security.
Okay.
Now, can I be cynical and say that I've been in the security business for almost 40 years myself in different ways. And somehow the sense one gets is that in India, I find that, you'll pardon my saying this so candidly, the Indian business corporate leader at the highest level is perhaps more willing to support an American think tank or an American institution or an American enterprise. But I've not seen the same kind of, shall we say, commitment to national security. Am I being unfair?
No, I think you're being fairly accurate. I don't think that's a wrong statement at all. Indian businesses tend to look very inward, and if they're going to be committing their time, the first reaction is what is in it for me or my company. Okay, so that is the current state of affairs. Having said that, I think there's a serious mindset change that is in the works right now, where people are willing to say that, okay, I'm standing for my nation. The level of patriotism which had kind of vanished in the middle is kind of coming back. So I think that now may be the right time to actually seed such an initiative. You will not get 700 executives to come in. You might start with 7, which will, grow as time moves on. Yeah. So, so I think the time is right, but so far, yes, your apprehensions are absolutely right.
But you think there is a slight sort of change and things are moving?
No, for example, we were talking about supporting some of these institutions like Brookings and Carnegie. And in the conversation that a few friends of us were having, and I said, why can't we put this kind of money together to create our own Indian version of the same? Why do we have to...
Sure, Mr. Punj, you're on national television, so we are going to come back to you and have a longer chat on this. But Ravi, I'm going to get you in on 2 issues. You spoke about risk management and as one of the USPs of the business world. How would you translate that in national security, for instance, in our current dealing with China? And I'm saying this very seriously. What can the business sector provide as inputs, say to the PMO, the MEA, the MOD, people who are trying to work out, options for dealing with China? That's one. And if you want to share your thoughts about what Mr. Punj just said, why is it that the Indian business sector, and you're a member of this esteemed group, not as, shall we say, involved in national security, at least till now?
Let me take the point that Atul has raised first. I think there has been insufficient interaction between the two, and therefore the defense sector, the national security sector, though in theory everyone believes it is important, many business people have not had enough contact with it. They are not customers, they are not suppliers, they are peripheral, as it were. But if there is greater interaction, let's say in my business I have 3 or 4 security establishments or even distant parts of the security establishment as customers, then I begin to know them. Once I begin to know them, I see their potential in many ways. I suggest ideas to them. They may see some value in some of those.
So the comfort level goes up on both sides.
So this is how this can increase.
Okay, taken. Now what about China?
Now, coming to China, let's take a sector which is of direct relevance to business, which is the present deficit in trade between India and China. It's a yawning gulf. Now, how do you really bridge this? Government has set up a strategic economic group. There have been a number of discussions and so on. In parallel, the businesses themselves are coping with it. But again, they are not coming together. Why can we not have, let's say, a strategic group consisting of the Ministry of Commerce, the Planning Committee, the Niti Aayog, the confederations of industry, the federation and so on, sit together, create a kind of a task force or a study group, call it what you will, and brainstorm, and then follow it through right down to implementation, take sector by sector. Now, this would involve business because they are dealing with stuff they know. This is good for the country, and it brings about a greater amount of coordination between business and government than there has been so far.
We'll try this out very soon. Mr. Punj, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to add on to that, the Indian mindset that we function is still a very, it's like the royal court almost. You have the people that are ruling, okay, then you have the entire...
We are a democracy, we are governed.
No, we have the government establishment, and the businessmen fall quite way down in the pecking order. So we don't have a seat at the table, okay, in line with what we should have. And hence, that we're always considered to be, especially the private sector, is considered to be at a second level, okay. Now, just to highlight that one point and make one example, if you look at the title of a business delegation accompanying our Prime Minister or a President on some overseas trips, and I've been on a few. The title of the delegation is Visit of the Indian Business Delegation coinciding with the visit of the Prime Minister of India. So it won't even be, accompanying the Prime Minister. So when we look at that level of disconnect.
That's a very important point.
Okay.
Choice of word is important.
That here we are going to present ourselves along with the leader of our country in a third country to bring out our best capabilities that we have, but we just happen to have been there at the same time.
At the same time. I think you're right.
It shows the mindset.
Yeah,
it
that
shows
needs
the
to be
mindset.
changed.
So till that closes, we have a problem.
Mr. Weiss, I want you to sort of come in on another issue, which is that I recall your first visit to India was in 1997 when you brought a Benz team here. And in your book, which has just been published, and I gather it's now a bestseller on Amazon, Being Dead is Bad for Business, you have a brief reference to how Benz played a role in the US-India relationship. You want to tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Yes, it was. Benz began making lots of trips, but at that time, the most important role, I think, was it was the 50th anniversary of India's independence, 1997, 70th, as you probably know this year.
This year.
The relationship between our countries was not good. It was still related back to Cold War idiocies. Anyway, and we felt it was very important for this to change, and consequently we thought it was very important for President Clinton to make a trip here. And some of us knew him, and some of us thought, additionally, the idea that Pakistan and India were hyphenated made no sense to us, and we thought that should be broken. And we had India, we felt, had 2 feet planted in the 21st century, and Pakistan planted in the past. So we had strong views about it. We persuaded the president to make a trip in 2000 here, and the Calcutta Telegraph, in fact, wrote very nice things about it. An organization that worked it out with 4 letters, BENS.
Yeah, I remember that. That was the. It said, why did President Clinton come to India? The answer is 4 letters, BENS. Is that right?
That's right.
Well, there you are. India has, a distinctive challenge and an opportunity ahead of it in relation to national security and the business sector. And the next decade will be critical to maximize the inherent synergy between the two. I recall a remark, Atul, what you were saying, made by the legendary J.R.D. Tata in the late 1970s, when he noted that the government in India does not really trust the businessman. I recall he said this in a conference, and hence there was no meaningful engagement, is what Mr. Tata said, on matters of national security between the business community and the government. However, in recent years, there has been a growing awareness, and I would even go to the extent of saying an acceptance, that India's national security compulsions require the private sector to be fully on board in the collective endeavor. And Prime Minister Modi has identified and prioritized Make in India as a national objective. But as our discussion has highlighted, in the defense and military inventory sector, design is a crucial core capability, and hence India needs to also include the Designed in India strand along with Make in India to the indigenization effort. India's ability to remain credible in its quest for strategic autonomy, quote unquote, in the global context is directly related to its prosperity index and the degree to which it is dependent on the foreign supplier for its major military inventory. The reality is that the current situation is very inadequate, to put it mildly. India's higher defense constituency and the business leaders need to rise to the challenge, and perhaps the experience of other democracies like Benz will offer some cues, and the sharing of best practices is a desirable first step. On that note, allow me to thank my guests, Mr. Stanley Weiss, Mr. Atul Punj, and Mr. Ravi Bhoothalingam. And thank you for watching Security Scan. Goodbye.